Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Marco.
Sean.
Beep, beep.
Beep, 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 beep. Are you calling me from space? Are you?
I'm calling you from the road.
Ah,
on my way to
beep, beep.
Vegas.
I thought it was more of a beep, beep, like a satellite going by,
or the Roadrunner.
Or the road. That Roadrunner could fit very well here because it's a chat on the road to Las Vegas. So usually we would do it in the car, both leaving from LA. So we go through the desert. This time it's not going to happen, but
our Roadrunners in the desert.
But the Roadrunner makes me think about, you always try a lot of different things. The latest technology with Acme, if you think about the cartoon, right? And sometimes it fails. Sometimes they have the opposite results that what he wants to achieve. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think you're reading me. I think you know me well.
I think you're onto something there,
right?
And I mean, for me, you just painted the picture of hacker summer camp in general. I mean, that's Black Hat in a nutshell, and DEF CON and the whole shooting match.
Yep.
Where everybody comes together to show what they've done that made something do something that it wasn't supposed to do.
Exactly.
Usually for good purposes.
Hopefully they don't blow themselves up.
That's right.
The coyote.
That's right.
And always does.
That's right. But enough about Roadrunners and Wile E. Coyotes and the beep beep sounds that they make. I'm thrilled to have Fredrik Heiding on. Fredrik, thanks for being patient as Marco and I pretend to have fun with each other. It's good to have you on, man.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here.
And you have a session at Black Hat, which is why we're chatting with you, and it's on a topic that's on top of mind for a lot of people, and they may not realize why, which is why we're going to be chatting with you today. Before we get into the world of AI and large language models and your comparison to human models, a few words about who you are, Fredrik, some of the things you work on, and your background, if you could, please.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm currently a research fellow in computer science at Harvard University in the last year of my PhD. So I'm also a PhD student from the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, where I started my PhD. I'm born in Sweden as well. I focused, I've been researching cybersecurity for the last 5-6 years. And in the early days of my PhD, I focused a lot on more technical penetration testing, created a framework for how to pen test IoT devices. I analyzed a lot of IoT devices that has really bad security. Did a pretty cool study where we tested devices from households with common embedded devices such as vacuum cleaners, refrigerators. And we found 17 CVEs in 22 devices. It's pretty hard, pretty many CVEs. Some of them are critical, rank 9 to 8 of 10 and these kind of things. So it's a pretty fun study. And we also found out that some of these devices that everyone has, people use them all over the world. There's smart door locks and pretty severe things. We can break them, enter the house. So basically, I guess a lot of the focus of my last years has been to find out all the vulnerabilities that exist out there and sort of poke at them. And something I'm really interested in how the changing landscape that we really have in technology sort of affects vulnerability. It goes fast in a lot of different ways. Everything's getting connected. We worked a lot with smart cities too, which is pretty cool. Here in the US now, I am part of investigating some smart cities, also health devices. Everything's getting connected, everything from new air sensors to health devices. And there's a massive amount of connectivity. And it's pretty dangerous because a lot of that connectivity is sometimes devices that are cheap, not produced in the US or in the country. They're not entirely secure. We find it in so many cases. And this sort of problem is that the nature of embedded devices is often that they're produced in mass quantity. You don't just want one air sensor, for example. If you're in a city, you want a lot of them. Yes, I guess I do, and that produces problems. I think it's really interesting to see, both from a technical perspective, how can you sort of prove that these devices are vulnerable? A lot of people do that, and I myself have done it too. And of course, from a bigger perspective, how do you solve this? I'm pretty invested now in the Joe Biden's Security Act that came earlier this year, secure by default and secure by design. It's a 12-point guideline for some best practices, and the best practices are actually pretty good. So I'm also starting a project with the Harvard Business School where we sort of try to investigate how this is implemented in practice, because that's I think if people would follow these code guidelines, things would be really good. The European Union had a similar framework earlier this year that they released, and I think these are really big acts. And what me and my department have been saying for a lot of years is that we are pretty bad at creating secure software, and everyone says it, right? And that's the main problem. And that's sort of yeah.
I was gonna say, I'll have to have you back on to dig into those acts and the guides, because I think it's an important discussion. That obviously shift left and moving things over before taking care of the problem before it becomes a problem is important. I want to bring us to the topic at hand, which is large language models and comparing that to human models. And I'm going to use a story. So I don't know if it was one of the first. It certainly felt like one of the first connected door locks on the market I bought many years ago. And being a security guy, I was worried about the networking and the vulnerability that device had. But where I made my final decision was in the physical human-based interaction of that device, meaning that when you physically lock a door, it works a certain way and it feels a certain way, and you can tell it latches. The connection of that device to the physical door wasn't quite right, and I felt that it would fail physically from a human perspective. And there are some other things in there as well, using it from a human perspective. I felt that failure was more likely than even the risk of a breach and that device being compromised digitally. So my point of all of this is we're going to compare the two, but I have a sneaky suspicion that they're still combined. The human's part of it at all times. So maybe a moment to describe large language models. What does that mean for folks who are listening who may not be familiar with it, and maybe a quick comparison to the human-centric models that folks might be a little more familiar with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, could I take 1 minute before that, sort of tie in? Because I was digressing a bit, but I'd love to just tie into why I'm going to speak about why I speak black. I think this is so interesting. But basically, after all these pen tests, I also worked pretty close to industry. And I think this is pretty relevant to mention. I met a lot of companies, and they, of course, think it's pretty cool to do these pen tests. But many organizations said that, hey, your work is awesome, but we don't really care because our problem is our users, our employees. They always mess up. We can't really... even if we make the physical security really good, we can't make the users do the right thing, because the users are often the weakest link. And I began slowly researching that, looking into cybersecurity training, more social engineering attacks, and that's from my perspective turned out to be a really big problem for a lot of companies, and that's what made me interested in that. And that what brings us to Black Hat, and we'll talk about how large language models can be used to exploit users, and that's. I just want to mention too, it's a collaborative effort. I don't do this alone. I work with a great team. So I have, I guess I can mention them after the description about language models, because that makes sense. But so yeah, what are language models and why are they interesting here? So as I mentioned, a lot of cyber attacks focus on humans. A lot of cyber attacks, of course, focus on technical system. But that's all well and done. The problem here is that there's something called large language models, and they're neural networks. And basically, they're a data model that's been trained on huge data sets. So it's a model that learns, and it learns by analyzing vast amount of data. And what happened when it analyzes all this data is that it gets really, really good at creating context that appears real. You can say that it learned, if you so will. So it learns how to create content that appears to be created by a human, specifically textual content for large language models. And what's important here to note, the learn appears real. The content is not necessarily real. In my research team, we did some tests. A lot of researchers did is to just try to do something with the research, and in the research you always cite things. It's pretty fun if you ask one of these language models to cite things. Maybe you ask, what's a DDoS attack? And it tells you what a DDoS attack is. Then you tell them, okay, give me the citation for this. Give me the references here so I can cite it. And it gives you a really good reference for it. It looks perfect. But when you look into that reference, it's complete bullshit. It's false. And that's one really interesting thing with large language models. And sometimes it creates content that is real. Oftentimes it is real. But what they do is they create content that appears to be real. And that's really, really important to remember. And that's, I'm going to talk about my team in a second, but that's why we brainstormed. We thought about, hey, how can this be used? And it can be used for physical hacking. I've done that myself too. But it's really interesting when it comes to hacking humans, because when hackers exploit employees or users or humans, they usually do it by to try to show them something that appears real, and the user falls for it and they trick it. So of course the hypothesis is that large language models are really good at tricking humans because they create content that appears real, and then humans fall for it. That's a little intro about large language models.
It's more than little, because you just highlight the fact that the key in hacking human is appears to be real. Either you want to pretend to be someone, you knock on the door with a certain uniform and people believe what they see. And so in the end, if it looks real, maybe we think that the model is actually thinking, even if it really just putting one word after another anyway. But what it really matters is the result of this. So I'd like to know, when you were running this comparison, and I'm sure you were looking at the way that the attackers can use this. So it's so good to pretend to be real that obviously it's a big asset for the cyber criminal. So give us some example of what you're going to be discussing and what the research find out about this. I mean, is it really more effective than the human manipulation when you do it with the machine?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's some things I want to highlight with that. So one thing is that it is really good at creating content that appears real. But another thing that's worth to mention is that it's also really easy to do this. So when you interact with language models, you usually only have to write one sentence. For example, create a phishing email targeting Harvard students who are frequent members of the Malkin Athletic Center, which is the gym on campus. And it's not hard to write that. You can write it in pretty bad English, but it's still okay. But when you write that sentence, you're going to get a really good phishing email that, it could have a call to action. For examul, press this link to get a 3 months membership. And why is this interesting? It's interesting because a lot of the phishing emails traditionally, up to this point for the last couple of decades, phishing has been around for a long time, they're pretty bad. And when we think about a phishing email, sometimes you think about the Nigerian prince scam. There's someone saying, hey, your grandmother died and you have $1 billion inheritance, and it's very obvious false. And there's some benefits with that too, but overall, there's a lot of really bad phishing emails out there. And my hypothesis is that will change. From now on, there will only be very good phishing emails, because it makes no sense to create an email from yourself. And that's a big difference. Like, I don't think we understand how big of a difference that is, because phishing emails are very easy to send. It doesn't really cost anything. You have to write the email, but when you have the email, you just send it. It doesn't cost anything to send an email, except for a minimal bandwidth and so forth. And imagine just that phishing emails are still efficient. People wouldn't use it if they weren't efficient. Everyone, of course, thinks you and I will never fall for it because they're stupid, but some people fall for them. But even the most phishing emails are pretty bad today, they're still efficient. So imagine when everyone, it doesn't matter if you're a native English speaker, you almost don't even have to speak English. You can create a native sounding email in seconds that are highly targeting, and it's pretty efficient. So I think the ease of access is a very strong point here, that it's going to be super easy to create large scale, not only phishing attack, but what we call spear phishing. And spear phishing is a targeted phishing attack. Instead of just sending random emails, maybe they target me as a Black Hat speaker. Say, hey, create an email to a Black Hat speaker saying that he has to register in this link in order to get his hotel reimbursement. That's a very targeted email. It's very easy to write that prompt, and the language model will create a super good email. It looks realistic, and maybe I would even fall for it. So I think that's one of the points I want to highlight, that they make it so easy, which is very dangerous.
And so let's talk a little bit about spotting these, because I mean, we have a hard enough time as individuals, not recognizing that this is an attack, asking us to click on a link. Organizations have a hard time determining whether something is real and should go to its destination or not.
Yeah.
I'm thinking even things like business email compromise, which is a little more along the lines of a of a spearfish attack, right?
Yeah.
Are we going to find ourselves in a situation where it's hard to spot these things, and because it's so easy, there's going to be so many that where we may have only had to identify and block 10 yesterday, we have 10,000 to block today?
Yeah, Sean, that's a perfect point, and yeah, I really believe we will. You're hitting the nail perfectly there. I think there will be a massive amount, even more than there is today. I met one interesting professor who said something theoretical. There will never be here in practice, I think. But if we just made every email cost $0.001 to send, all this would go away because it would be infeasible. That will never happen. People want to send free emails, but it's free to send. It takes 1 second to create. Everyone can do it, and it's a perfect English email. Yeah, I really believe there will be a bomb of emails that are very hard to spot.
Can you tell me about the process though? Because I think it's probably easy for most to see the body of the email getting created, and then naturally the subject line for the email. You mentioned the call to action.
Yeah.
With a link. Is that a manually connected thing, or is the LLM creating that link as well? Is it going out and sourcing the phishing payload for the bad actor? I'm thinking about the from address, the to address. If it's a business email compromise, it's using maybe a slightly different domain name that looks identical to the real one that it's coming from. Can it get down to that level, and are there other things like metadata and things like that it can help tweak to help it bypass detection?
Yeah, that's super good, and like I actually really like that question, and that's something that I'm currently in sort of my new research looking into, and I like to call it like the phishing kill chain, or whatever in cyber you often call it the cyber kill chain, which is a bunch of steps to hack something. But it's a chain of stuff, right? You don't only want to create the email, but before that there's a first step, which is you want to collect some background information. You scrape some data, and that doesn't have to be hard, but you want just a few data points of the user, and that makes a massive difference. Do I live in Sweden? Do I live in America? Am I a student, or do I work at Amazon or whatever? And just these, everyone has big digital footprints online. So first you want to collect the data, just a few points. Then you want to create the email. Then you want to create a call to action. And as I said, all these things can actually be automated. And what I really would like to do is I want to pick out all of these things and see which is the most feasible to start, because this will be automated into phishing bots. It's going to be super easy. And yeah, like you can already write to an arbitrary large language model, hey, create a language page in Python using React, whatever you want, whatever language you want almost. Create a landing page that collects the IP address of the user. That sounds really interesting, but maybe create a landing page that prompts the user to log in to enter their company's new job portal, whatever. That's easy. So what you can even do is that you can collect some background information. Then maybe you see that, hey, this person just uploaded to LinkedIn that they started a job at Google 2 weeks ago. Perfect. The language model takes that information and says, hey, create a language or a landing page for new Google employees, ask them to register to get all the company benefits. Paste it in the link, create a phishing email with that, sending it out. Participant presses the link, they see this landing page to enter their information. Once again, this is easy to do. You can automate this so that everyone, what would have taken months to do can take seconds to do in these targeted attacks. And everything, the whole chain can be automated. And even to a future point, when the person enters this web page, then they can enter to maybe a chatbot. And that's what the language models are best at, to talk with you. So that you talk with this person maybe. And you can do this in all kinds of use cases. And it's really, there's a bunch of studies. I did some before, but trying to make people spot fake web pages, that's almost impossible. If you take Amazon and you change one letter, it's so hard to recognize because we just don't see these kind of things. So yeah, it can be automated. I would definitely like to just pick out every layer. There's 5 phases or whatever you want to say in this process, and see where can we stop it, because some of them will be really hard to stop, but maybe some of them we can stop to make this automated chain impossible, or at least harder, because it's going to be very easy if we don't add roadblocks. And I think we need to add some roadblocks here.
All right, so let's talk about that, and I'm sure that's where you guys are going to go into when you do the presentation. But I'm kind of curious, they're always like, first there is a technology, we're all excited about it, and then we figure it out, and this is the history of humanity, that, hey, we can use this hammer not just to nail something, but to kill someone, or to do other things. And so all of a sudden these models are from really cool to very dangerous, and then eventually we say, you know what, maybe more technology, we need a bigger hammer to slam the small hammer. My point is, we, as I say we because we are on the good side, I think, I hope, we're not the villain. So what do the cybersecurity protector can do with this now that it's in the hand of a very creative cyber criminal mind? Then how do we take it back and say, well, we can still use this technology to detect when something happened or to block it? Where are we with that? I mean, are you guys going to cover some of this angle?
That's an awesome question. I really like you saying that, and that's to some degree the most important thing to ask. And we will, for sure. Basically, my presentation, or our presentation with Black Hat, will be divided in 2 parts. How can AI be used to hack us, and how can AI be used to help us from being hacked? And I think it's really interesting to cover this. And also, I want to sort of follow up to what you say and mention some positive notes, because sometimes these days AI discussions are really sort of doom and gloom. They're pretty negative, and I want to try to clear the fog around that a little bit too, and say, and there's a lot of uncertainties. We don't know what happened, but AI is a tool, just like a hammer or whatever tool you have. It can be used for bad and for good. There's so many fantastic use cases with AI. So I really don't want my talk to be something that says AI is bad, we should be afraid of it or whatever. But AI is a tool. It's a very interesting tool, one of the fastest growing and evolving tools I've ever seen. But it's a tool that can be used for bad and for good. And we did find out it can be used for quite a lot of bad things. We also found out it can be used for a lot of good things, and that's actually one of the more interesting part. And primarily, we investigated two things: how can AI and specifically large language models be used to detect phishing emails, not just detect them, but detect the intent of the attacker. And that's something we often focus on. The intent is really interesting because we already have really good spam filters. All the emails have them, and a lot of research is being done in this area too, both by industries and academia. How can we improve the spam filters with large language models? And the spam filters are fairly good. They block out a lot of content, and that's awesome. And that's something that I really want to highlight. That all these, it's a race basically between the bad guys and the good guys. And the bad guys try to use the AI to create good phishing emails. The good guys try to use them to create good spam filters in different ways. And what we have investigated a little bit is not just to create a good spam filter, because a lot of people do that and they do it well, but I'd like a more granular spam filter. I can say not just this looks like a bad email, but it's like, hey, this looks like an email that tries to get you to get a gift card. So you should be a little bit careful because X, Y, Z. And some of the models, there are a bunch of different large language models, and some of them, and not everyone, but some of these vendors, they were really good at not just finding the correct intent, and that's really hard to do, but they do it pretty well, and also giving recommended actions. So for example, one email we fed to a language model, say, hey, here's an email. What do you think is the intent of this email? And then the model, and this is pretty cool, this is a good email that looks like a legit email offering you a gift card at the store. And then the language model say, hey, the intent of this email appears to be a phishing email. On the front, it tries to make you get a gift card, but we believe it really tries to phish you because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that's super cool that they can do that because that's quite sophisticated. And then they also say, hey, if you really want this gift card, you might want to go to the official page of this company and check whether the offer is valid. And if you don't find any information there, send an email to the contact page of this company and see if the gift card is valid. I mean, that's really good advice. I don't think I could give better advice than that, and I should be some kind of expert in this area. But that's quite impressive. So there's a lot of really good use cases, and that's something we investigate into. Not just have this binary way, because binary classification is good in saying this is spam, this is not spam, or malicious, non-malicious. But language models gives us a way to do this in a much more detailed way.
Well, I'm going to
I
go
like
back
that.
to the. Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead,
Sean. Just a quick, yeah, because it really kind of made a little light bulb blink in my head, because it's like, as you said, like if you use it not just to automatically block everything, but to actually educate the user as you go, and it's like, hey, before you do this, how about that? Or
Yeah.
this seems a little suspicious. What about you do this before you actually
Yeah.
act on that? And I think it could become the very human element that comes into play to educate them, instead of
Yeah.
just say, here's the easy button to protect you from everything. Sorry, Sean,
Yeah.
just my mind going there.
No, I mean, the cool thing is that there's a lot of opportunity to think of new ways to leverage this technology, and I want to bring it back to one of the very first points you made, which was how easy it was or is
Yeah.
to just write a simple query or prompt, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the value of this in defense, where today we're trying to build massive filter lists and all of these algorithms to try to find context and behavior and all these things that perhaps a simple question
Yeah.
as something comes in, if I see if it's heading toward this particular group, is it X, Y, and Z? And I'm not going to try to pretend to be smart here, but I guess the point is a query or a prompt to look at things as they're happening, perhaps with the ability to look deeper into the contents based on its learning as an LLM, can help identify things that no filter and no algorithm outside of an LLM could ever figure out. So I want to. We're coming up close to our time here today, and our car to Vegas is going to run out of gas if we don't wrap up. I'm joking, of course. But what I want to do, I mean, you have some cool folks joining you on stage. Bruce Schneier, of course, many folks know, Arun Vishwanath, and Jeremy Bernstein. The four of you get to talk GPT-3, GPT-4, and human models, all in the context of the things we talked about today. That's on Wednesday the 9th, 10:20,
Yeah.
level 3 South Seas CD for folks who know where that is. Maybe a quick recap from you or summary from you of the session. What do you hope people to walk away with after spending that time with you on Wednesday?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I really want to sort of throw back what you said there and just give a highlight to the team, because this is really created by everyone. And Jeremy is a close friend and a postdoc at MIT in neural networks. He really is an expert from the machine learning perspective, all of this. And yeah, Bruce Schneier, he's of course a security expert, but he also wrote a book released earlier this year called The Hacker's Mind, which, among other things, he mentions how emerging technologies are changing the hacker landscape to some degree anyway, and that sort of plays well into the presentation. And Aaron wrote a book released it last year called The Weakest Link, which talks about phishing and why phishing is so successful. So like all of our combined effort really goes into this presentation. I have some expertise in phishing and hacking also. So I really want to highlight how this is a combination of all our works. And yeah, what I want people to come away with. First of all, I want to give some sort of specifics to this, and I really try to do it because I think AI is super interesting, large language models, there's so much talk about it now. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's some people say a lot of things, and then some people don't really believe them. I want to try to give some concrete information and say, hey, we actually tried this. We knew everything can happen in the future. I think it's pretty fun to sort of pretend, to just look into the future, see what will happen, what can happen. But what we did here is, okay, what can we do? Like everything is super cool, but if we really take the best AI models out there, the best human model out there, how do they fare? Like where are we right now? And one thing I like to highlight with that is that in this type of research field, which is quite rare, honestly, but when you get some results these days, the results are more or less already obsolete because it goes so fast. And that's why I'm going to blend, some of our results from the earlier studies with the work we do right now and the sort of new results we're getting. But basically just give some clarity on, where are we? Like regardless of all the talk and the hype and these things, what is the exact capabilities right now, and what can we expect that this will lead to in the near future and the further away future?
I love it. And Marco loves when I say one more question, because you made a point on charging a fraction of a penny, a fraction of a dollar for sending emails. That's the delivery mechanism, which, to your point, I don't think we're actually going to charge for email delivery. But I've seen extremes in the use of the LLM technologies, where in some instances it's completely free, and then if you try to get advanced with it, it can actually cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, very quickly, if any of the four of you have any thoughts on the economics of this as a way to perhaps control some of the threat that it brings, and I don't know if that impacts then the ability to counter measure some of these things as well.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And I don't think we have focused too much on it, because the problem is that some of these models are already able to download open source, so to speak. So you can just download them, have them locally, and it's very expensive to train them, but running them is not very expensive, which means that it's going to be pretty easy to just run these queries and get the results. And it's hard to sort of monitor strain this. What you could do, and especially it's hard to add monetary implications that makes it hard for criminals to use them, but it could make it possible for other people to use it. Like you can, but I think that's pretty hard. There's definitely, you could definitely do it, but I don't have an answer from the top of my mind of how to do that in a good way. But it is a cool point, and I'll definitely think a bit more of it.
Yeah, and I was driven by Marco and I were having a conversation yesterday about.
What I was thinking is, except that people go into crime because they're actually making good money. It may not last. So if there is somebody that has the budget to pay the extra, it's probably not the regular user. But
I know that's true actually. So, and cybercrime is good money these days, so that's definitely a problem.
We're not actually telling you to go there. We're doing the opposite here. Just want to
that's true.
People know. Anyway, I'm excited to follow this conversation that you guys are going to have, and definitely relevant. We're talking about that all the time for the good and the bad.
Yep, great panel, great topic, at a great event, of course, and hope everybody enjoys your session, enjoys chatting with you, and meeting the rest of your panel, and obviously, hopefully, folks are thinking a bit more about this topic, and
that would be good.
We'll join you to hear each of your thoughts on it. So thanks everybody for listening to this. Thanks, Fredrik, for sharing your thoughts on this topic, and for putting that session together. Of course, everybody listening to us, we have a lot coming from Black Hat this year in Hacker Summer Camp, and you can follow it all on ITSPmagazine.com/BHUSA, and more chats on the road, keynotes, speakers, panelists, you got it. It's all going to be there. Links to that will be in the show notes, along with Fredrik's and team's presentation and other stuff from Black Hat. So keep well, everybody. Have fun with AI responsibly.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Fredrik.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our columns. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.